Hi everyone, this is Koinzell here, and today we're going to talk about Nilou. Yes, this is the Nilou Math Guide 1. We are starting the Nilou series. So naturally this is Nilou stats along with Nilou's signature weapon. I know it looks kind of off with her, right? I'm sure I'm not the only one to share this sentiment. But it doesn't matter because this weapon's performance is really good for her and I'll talk about it. So I'll quickly go through Nilou stats and weapon before we go through what else we're going to cover here. It's going to be just the key analysis for this first math guide, otherwise the video will just be too long. So here, she has 15k HP, which is expected from a HP scaling character. Typically, at 5 star, it should be like 15k. Attack is low, and that doesn't matter because again, HP scaling, defense, her essential stat is HP percentage. So that's interesting, right? Because it's not crit, it's not elemental damage, it's HP percentage. And I'll talk more later, or at least in the next video, why it's all HP percentage. Even her signature weapon has HP percentage as the substat, and it's a hefty amount of HP percentage, by the way. This is the highest I've ever seen so far. Yeah. But I think this is also the first time that we get a 5-star weapon in HP percentage, right? If I didn't remember wrongly. So, in terms of the refinement effect, you have HP increased by 20% and R5 is 40%. This is from the Chinese translation or description. The English translation doesn't have this correctly for some reason. Okay. Oh, and the HP is so high because this is one of those low base stat weapon. So if you see here, basically, whenever your elemental skill hits the open, you gain this effect for 20 seconds. What this effect does is that increases your EM, Nilou's EM in this case, if Nilou is equipping it, by 0.12% of her match HP. You can trigger this once every 0.3 seconds and it's max 3 sets. So if you understand how Nilou's skill works, you know that basically as part of a kit, you will definitely get the 3 stats easily. Okay? So what happens is that once you get 3 stats on top of this being 0.36% of the max HP, the elemental mastery of all nearby party members will be increased by 0.2% of the equipping character's max HP as well. So again, giving you EM based on HP scaling, and it will give to the entire team. Okay, so this weapon is kinda like Allergy, where you are able to give EM to the team as well. Of course, Allergy doesn't just give EM, Allergy gives attack percentage too. But for the purpose or the sake of the weapon refinement effect here, it gives just EM, although it's a slightly higher EM if you build your HP high enough. Alright, so that's that. And obviously R5 everything is doubled, right? 40% HP increase in so 20, 0.24% for each stack, so total 0.72% for Nilou, and 0.4% to the entire team. Now I know it doesn't look like a high amount, but if you know how high Nilou's HP will reach, it is actually pretty decent. You typically get about 100 to 130 EM for R1 to the entire team, and double that when it's R5. Okay. So I am not going to go through the stats here. In fact, the math is not done. You can see. Okay. But we will talk about that eventually. For now, let's look at her kit first. So you have the talents, the passives, the constellations. I'll do a constellation summary or conclusion and a kit summary. I know she's getting to post a lot, so I will address all of those. And we have the important notes and assumptions, the ER requirement, energy generation, or rather in this case, because it's solo, most likely it's just the, I'm just doing the energy generation. Let me put energy generation, alright? And we just talk about Nilou's rotation in general before we go to TLDR and what's coming next for Nilou. I am personally very excited to do the second Nilou math. It's not the comp, it's something else, and I'll show you guys later. But in fact, that Nilou Math Guide 2 content was originally meant to be here together with Math Guide 1, but I think the video will be too long if I put it in. So I've split it. So we'll just look at her kit for now first. Okay, so talents. Let's talk about her talents. Normal attack talent does of Samsar. Nilou's normal attacks are actually from her E talent during her E, so this NA talent can be kept at level 1. Okay, whatever normal attacks they are doing during her E are all skilled based off her elemental skill, not her normal attack, so you do not need to level this at all. Okay, now next, elemental skill. There's a whole lot of percentages here, right? This is the dance of Hafkasva. Pardon me if I didn't read this correctly. So you see so many different figures here. Instead of going through them all at one go, I'm just gonna go to the text here and I'll run through it step by step. Alright. So Nilou's E is very complicated at first glance. You just look at the number of lines above. However, it's actually pretty straightforward. Okay, so first off, once you activate her E, she effectively goes into a period state. I have no idea how to pronounce it, sorry. I'm sorry. That lasts for 10 seconds. Okay, this is it. During these 10 seconds, her damage is converted to Hydro that cannot be overridden. Okay, all her damage. It says damage here, it doesn't say what specific attack. So everything that she attacks is Hydro. She dishes out is the Hydro. And it's actually considered elemental skill damage. Do you see here? It's considered elemental skill damage. Which means when you press her normal attack, she's doing a normal attack swing, but it's Hydro damage and it's elemental skill damage. Okay? So all her NAs in this state are all Hydro elemental skill damage. Now, upon entering this state, you have two options. One is to go main TPS, the other is to go off-field enabler. You might notice why I'm saying off-field enabler instead of sub DPS, because she actually doesn't do any DPS or damage during this off-field enabler mode. But more about that later. Okay, so first off, main TPS is where you go for sword dance. You press it 3 times. So first you press E, then you press the first NA. What happens here? If you see here the bracket, square brackets here says NA, right? So if you hit the bracket, if you hit the NA button, the sword dance first hit, and this is the damage based off of the max HP. And second hit is the sword dance second hit here, and you have the third hit, which is called Luminous Illusion, which is a much bigger AOE along with a much higher skilling, almost double that of the first hit, right? That brings you to your main DPS role. Your off-field enabler will be the next, which is Whirling Steps. So you do two Whirling Steps, and Whirling Steps is via pressing E, as you can see in the square bracket here. So press E first to activate the mode. Press E again, that's the Whirling Steps first hit. Press E again, that's the Whirling Steps second hit. And press E again, which is the fourth time. This is the Water Wheel damage. Okay, now you see that the damage is not that high, right? Because it's really meant to be more of an off-field enabler, not a main DPS per se. Now you see that there are two other stuff here, right? Lunar Prayer and Tranquility Aura. So let me talk about this. So for Sword Dance main DPS first, upon entering your third normal attack, which is the Luminous Illusion, after triggering it, Nilou will enter Lunar Prayer for 8 seconds. So this is the third NA that you press right after pressing E. Okay, so first you go into the Period state, then you go into Sword Dance state, or rather Lunar Prayer state, where basically all of the normal attacks are converted to this tree here, specifically this tree. So you just keep repeating. All her normal attacks are Sword Dancers, and the third hit is always Luminous Illusion. So I get a strong grip fight here, seriously. So Google over Gear and enjoy one of the best light novels if you don't know what I'm referring to. There's no sponsor here, okay? I'm too small of a YouTuber to get any sponsors. So this is it. Now, what this means is that you repeatedly spam Sword Dance first hit, second hit, Luminous Illusion, and you continue as part of her main DPS cycle within 8 seconds while you're still in your Lunar Prayer duration. Now next, which is the off-field enabler. For off-field enabler, once you trigger the Water Wheel, what happens? For Water Wheel, the AOE is bigger, slightly bigger than Luminous Illusion. At least Luminous Illusion is a little bit more fronter. Water Wheel, from what I saw, is all around her. Okay, so what happens is that she will end up giving something called Tranquility Aura for 12 seconds to active characters. So as you switch, you still get your Tranquility Aura, which basically is kind of like a much bigger version of Barbara's E. It applies wet to enemies within its AoE, and the AoE is much bigger than Barbara's. If I were to put a comparison, I would say it's something like Cookie's E, maybe slightly smaller than Cookie's E. Yeah, but visually it looks the same, the distance. And this is how she will be enabling her bountiful cost if you're not using main DPS, right? Because she's still applying wet. Obviously, wet main DPS, you are constantly dealing hydro air damage. You will be applying wet as well. It's just that the Tranquility Aura allows you to apply wet, but the problem is that it doesn't do any damage. Okay, just bear that in mind. Not that it's that big of a factor, but yeah. I guess that's why the AoE is big. Bigger than Barbara's anyway. Alright, let's talk about next talent. Okay, Elemental Burst Q, Dance of the Azendegi, Distant Dreams, Listening Scream. God, that's a really long name. So you have the multipliers here at level 9 and level 12. So skill damage is 31.33% max HP and Lingering Aeon damage 38.3% max HP. It's an 18-second cooldown, 70 energy cost Q. But basically, what the thing about this lingering Aeon damage is basically a second hit after a short time. So Nilou's Q is basically a typical high damage type of burst that does 2 hits. It has quite a bit AoE too, so that's nice. Maybe I shouldn't say high damage. I mean, it did get nerfed, but in the first place, if you think about how high Yelan's E multiplier is, I don't know whether I should call this a high damage burst. But then again, Yelan's E is a high damage E, so okay. Anyway, now I know this got nerfed recently, the most recent change last week. So I'll address the nerf later because that requires me to talk about her entire design. So I don't want to talk about it here. We are done talking about the talents. Let's talk about the passives. So passives, first one is the White Jade Lotus. I mean, this is pretty straightforward stuff, right? I mean, it's good to have, but it's not that important. You just get more chance to get adventure related food. That's it. Huh. The next passive, her A1 passive, is the most interesting passive. I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time talking about this because just look at the amount of text here. Holy, I think this is even longer than Cole's passive, right? The collected miscellany voice actor is gonna have a hard time on this. Okay, but simply put, when all characters in the party are all Dendro or Hydro, you need at least one Dendro and one Hydro. When you do your third dance step, which is either the Illuminous Illusion or the Water Wheel damage. Sorry, the Water Wheel. When you do that, it will grant all nearby characters the Golden Chalice bounty for 30 seconds upon its completion. So characters under the effect of Golden Chalice bounty will increase the EM of all nearby characters by 100 for 10 seconds whenever they are hit by Dendro. So remember, what hits you with Dendro? Rupture, Dendro cause. Right? And that brings us to the next point, where upon triggering Bloom reaction, what this Golden Chalice bounty does is that it creates Bountiful Cores instead of Dendro Cores. So Bountiful Cores will burst very quickly after being created, and they have larger AoEs, larger than the Dendro Cores. And in return, Bountiful Cores cannot trigger Hyper Bloom or Burgeon. They share an upper numerical limit with Dendro Cores, but that doesn't really matter because it bursts really quickly. Oh wait, it matters when you have more than 6 enemies, I guess. Because the upper numerical limit is 6. So if you have 7 enemies and you hit them all at the same time, you will only spawn 6 cores instead of 7 bountiful cores. Okay. Now, bountiful core damage is considered damage dealt by the Dendro cores produced by Bloom. This is so that you know how to do the formula. Or at least I know how to do the formula, damage-wise. So, should a party not be the condition for the passive talent, any existing Golden Chalice bounty effect will be cancelled. So I think this is the case that if you're in co-op and somehow you change the party, boom, that's it. Or if you put down your attacks and somehow you're able to change the party, then yeah. Whatever the case, this is Nilou's most defining talent. Okay, this is her most defining talent because once you do your third dance set, which is either the Luminous Illusion or Water Wheel, the NA and the E, you get this Golden Chalice bounty, which gives 100 EM to team and herself for 10 seconds. I'm pretty sure they don't stack, so it should be one time only. Natural Curse replaced by Bountiful Cause. So the most important thing I think is the fact that they explode after 0.5 seconds from spawning. If you see any of the leaked videos right now, Bountiful Cause, the moment you spawn it, it lands on the floor, boom, it explodes. That's how far it is. Now, this is a huge improvement over the 6 seconds from original Dendro Cause. If you remember, the original Dendro Cause takes 6 seconds to explode if you did not hit the upper numerical limit. Whereas in the case of Bountiful Course, it just explodes in 1/12 the time, 0.5 seconds. But this passive does have a rather severe restriction on computing, right? It's limited to Dendro and Hydro. I'll do a separate session to deep dive on the damage figures. Oh wait, sorry, it's not a separate section. It's a separate video now because like I said earlier in the intro, I've already moved this out to a separate video. Okay, so I will compare Bountiful Costly in the separate video versus Hyper Bloom and Virgin, just to see if it's worth the restriction per se. Okay, so this is the A1 passive. It's really her most defining feature or most important design. Now let's talk about the next passive, Dreamy Dance of Aeons. Every 1000 points of Nilou's max HP above 30,000 will cause the damage dealt by Bountiful Course created by characters affected by Golden Chalice Bounty to increase by 9%. Effectively, very simply, Bountiful Course get a 9% damage for every 90% damage bonus for every 1000 points of Nilou's max HP above 30,000. So if you have 50,000 HP, you have 20,000, right? So it's 20 times 9%, 180%. Yeah. Now the maximum increase is 400%. This actually got buffed. In the past, or rather last week, it was 7 and 300%. At the point of last week, at the point of me doing this video. So now it's 904, 9 and 400. Which I can tell you guys, this is really good because you will be building HP on Nilou anyway. And all you need to do is just build HP to increase the Bountiful Core damage by 400%. But it's not easy to hit this 400% because you need 74445 HP on Nilou. So yeah, you should not be targeting to hit the 400%, but I'll talk more about that later in the next video. So this was buffed recently to align with a design philosophy, and I'll talk more about it when we finally go to the kit summary and the constellations. Okay. So we are done with talents and passive. Now it's constellations. C1, Dance of the Waning Moon. So the E, Dance of Hashkasva, which is a E, will be enhanced such that the Luminous Illusion damage is increased by 65%. So Luminous Illusion damage is the third hit, every third hit in the normal attack in her Sword Dance after you press the first E. On top of that, if you don't go for normal attacks, you go for the triple E, it's the Tranquility's aura duration is extended by 6 seconds. So instead of 12 seconds, it's 18 seconds now, which basically means 100% uptime. Because the cooldown of a E is 18 seconds. But while you are in the period state, right, the cooldown, it doesn't show as started, but it is in effect. Go and look at the leak videos, you will see when someone does like say E followed by 3 NH, right, the icon for the skill finally changes to become the cooldown with counter, and it starts from 15 seconds because it took 3 seconds to cast your E and 3 normal attacks. Yeah. Okay. Okay, but anyway, for C1, if you look at Nilou's kit, you are encouraged to build as much HP as possible. So the Luminous Illusion damage increase to me is meant to help offset the damage bonus loss from not using Hydro Goblet. Even if you're using Hydro Goblet, this 65% is still a very good boost. Okay. Forget about what you know about diminishing returns because there's way too many people who get 200 about diminishing. They don't understand that you need a lot of damage bonuses for damage bonus to actually diminish to a factor where it's lower than attack. Okay. So what this C1 does to me is to offset not using Hydro Goblet. That's the view I get when I see this. For the plus 6 seconds on Tranquility Aura, like I said, it's 100% uptime, so it's really helpful in the Bountiful Core generation, so that's nice. Now, let's talk about the next constellation, C2. After characters affected by the Golden Chalice Bounty deal Hydro damage to an opponent, the opponent's Hydro resistance will be decreased by 35% for 10 seconds. After a triggered Bloom reaction deals damage to opponents, their Dendro resistance will be decreased by 35% for 10 seconds. So you have two conditions here. One is to deal Hydro damage while you still have the Golden Chalice Bounty on you. The second is to do a Bloom reaction that explodes Which remember, if you're on bounty full call, yes, push immediately, right? Yeah. So effectively, you get both Hydro Resistance Shred and the Dendro Resistance Shred, and this is a very nice C2 because it provides these two resistance shred. And remember, her A1 passive restricts us to Dendro and Hydro only, so you do not have 4-piece VV resistance shred for Hydro. Yeah, you do not have that because you're doing double Dendro, double Hydro, or 3 Dendro, 1 Hydro, or 3 Hydro, 1 Dendro if you want. But I'll talk more about that in the com. Obviously, you should try to get both resonances. Yeah. So this constellation is very simple. It's meant to overcome the disadvantage of not having 4-piece VV resistance shred. It's as simple as that. And the 4-piece resistance is only for Hydro. They also give you a Dendro resistance on this C2, which improves your bountiful core damage. In the next video, I'll show you guys how good C2 is. I already finished the math for that. I'll show you guys how good C2 is, especially in relative comparison to the Hyper Bloom and Burgeon. Alright, so that's C2. C3 is straightforward stuff, increasing the level of the Q. So personally, I initially thought that her E would be on the C3, but I guess the most important aspect of her E is the mechanics of it, which doesn't really scale with talent levels. Although I know that the normal attack as a mid DPS does, okay? So I guess it can make sense that Q is on C3 if you consider both her off-field enabler and mid DPS. If you consider the main field, then obviously you want E to be C3. So I don't know, maybe they'll still change this in future, or maybe they'll stay with this. Whatever the case, it's 3 talent levels. 3 talent levels typically is about a 20 to 21% increase for that specific talent itself. Alright? So C4, Frequentive Pulse here. After the third set of Dance of Hashkasva, Pyroid hits opponents, Nilou will gain 15 elemental energy and damage from her Dance of Azadengi Distant Dreams, okay, which is a Q. Damage from her Q will be increased by 50% for 8 seconds. Now remember, her Luna Prayer lasts for 8 seconds. If you try to do the Q after her normal attacks, after the Luna Prayer, this will be gone. Because you have a 2-second animation task time for the Q, unless her Q snapshots this damage bonus. Otherwise, you have to use it during the Luna Prayer. So that's not as ideal. Okay? So Frequentive Pulse that helps with the energy, because Nilou is not going to be getting a lot of energy. She only has like 4.5 energy gain. But I'll talk more about the energy generation. I kind of gave that away already. But basically, this is helpful. And it's also very interesting that her C4 is not team buff, because most C4 for 5-star is a team buff. But the reason for this, in my opinion, is that Nilou's kit is already centered around the Golden Chalice Bounty team buff. What she needs is energy, so has to go for more HP and damage increase for a Q, because her damage will not be as high if you go for the full HP build. Okay, if you go for the full HP build, you're going to suffer later on the crit stats, so having a damage increase for a Q helps bridge that, helps make it such that Q isn't that bad. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? Having a damage bonus doesn't always have to be a cookie cutter build, like the typical crit DPS build. It can be something like this. Okay, next C5, very straightforward, increasing the level of the E by 3. And now we have finally the C6. For every 1000 points of max HP, Nilou's crit rate and crit damage will increase by 0.6% and 1.2% respectively. The maximum increase in crit rate and crit damage via this method is 30% and 60% respectively. Sorry. What the actual right? 30 CR and 60 CD is 120 CV. It's 120 CV from one constellation, and there's no trigger condition. Realize? There's no trigger condition. It's not restricted to any specific type of damage. The only thing you need to do is just build HP. And 50,000 HP will get you this 120 CV. You don't even need 670k. You don't need 60k. 50k will do. So it's easily achievable with Nilou, especially with her Ascension stat and her signature weapon. So this is unlike the 400% for the Bountiful Core. This is easily achievable. 400% for Bountiful Core requires you to get like 74, almost 75k HP. Oh sorry, almost 74.5k HP. But 50k HP will get you this 120 CV. But I can tell you guys there's a reason why it looks so imba. Because it's meant to give you decent CV even you go full HP on her. And reaching good crit stats if you target 50k HP as a cap on a crit build. Okay? I see this as a supplement to the full HP build. That's why it's so crazy good. Because if you don't go for the full HP build, if you go to the crit build, you're gonna lose out on HP, right? You might end up getting the CV as well. So that's that. Okay. Now, an interesting part, the constellations conclusion. Okay, all of the constellations look good to me. I know people are complaining about her cons improving her personal damage while she's kind of shoehorned into a bountiful core build, right? And she's been Doom posted as having a messy design. Oh my god, Hoyoverse is designing her to be a bountiful core character, but yet the constellations are increasing her damage. Damage in terms of the damage bonus, which does not work for bountiful core if you know how the damage formulas work. But in the first place, I see her constellations as improving her personal damage in a bountiful core comp to begin with. Okay, if you see the impact of HP on the bountiful core damage, the above should be clear. Even her signature weapon is HP instead of crit. Her ascension stat is HP instead of crit. It's because she is, whatever the cons are supposed to do, is meant to improve her personal damage while you're in a bountiful core comp. Think of it this way. To attract wheels, her personal damage has to be high, visible. And when I say visible, it means that it's something that you can feel when you go from C0 to C6 as a wheel, as someone who's spending money on the game. Which is why the constellations are about improving that, right? The constellations are all about improving her personal damage that you can visibly see. But at the same time, or rather there are some constellations that also improve the bountiful core, like C2 and C1 indirectly. But at the same time, it's encouraging you to go full HP, right? If you look at the constellations, especially C6. And if you go full HP, it doesn't just maximize her personal damage, it also maximizes her bountiful core damage. Okay, see the capital N here. Bountiful core is maximized as well when you go full HP. And to top that off, you get even more EM from her signature weapon, and her signature weapon also allows you to give EM team buffs. So this is how they attract the wheels, right? By making it such that you, even without constellations, the bountiful core build will work. While you have constellations, the bountiful core gets improved, her own personal damage gets improved as well. So it's like best of both worlds for wheels. I can tell you it looks really good. I've sort of mapped out the initial stats. It looks really good for C6. Okay, now one last thing, or rather one last big portion. If you really think about it, if her constellations all focus on improving her bountiful cost instead of her personal damage, you know what will happen? It will mean that the C0 of the fundamental design, which is the bountiful cost, will be weaker in order to balance. And who suffers? F2P players, C0 players. Do you understand? By putting damage bonuses and improving her personal damage in the constellations instead of bountiful core, is actually F2P friendly because F2P players do not need to get those constellations for the bountiful core to work. The bountiful core builds to work. Okay? So this is a good design. This is a good design, okay? This is actually a good constellation design because she should work perfectly fine at C0 for bountiful cores with only one constellation that improves it directly C2, while C1 is indirect, while the other constellations are all improving her personal damage, and thus not leaving you wanting more for a bountiful cores, especially if you are F2P. Right, because if you're F2P player, if the bountiful core build works right, don't really need more personal damage for her. To be honest, you don't really need more personal damage from her if the bountiful core works. It's for players who really want to maximize her, if her wheels who feel good about seeing high damage from her or decent damage from her on top of the bountiful cores working. And by the way, I'm not a Hoyoverse sim. Me praising the design doesn't mean that I'm a Hoyoverse sim, okay? In fact, I personally wouldn't mind if Nilou is back. It will help me save money, since I already intend to see Cyno. It will help me save money. But if I look at it objectively, I don't think her constellations are messy at all. In fact, I think it's a good design. It's good for F2P players. Alright. This is the constellation summary or conclusion. Let's talk about the kit summary. To me, Nilou is similar to Cyno in terms of how stat hungry she is, with her demand being on HP percentage, crit stats, some ER, EM, and flat HP. Her kit gives her a very nice design where she can either be a main DPS or an off-field enabler just from her E alone, with the stats on both not being completely mutually exclusive. The way you build her. Huh? This matters for the way you build her. Now, I know people aren't happy that she has to be shoehorned into a Hydro and Dendro only Bloom comp, but I'm actually looking forward to it. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm looking forward to this. Why? Let's face it, how many of you will play Pure Bloom right now? I no Hyper Bloom, no Virgin. Most Bloom related comps are Hyper Bloom comps right now. Yeah? Virgin is because it's very restrictive to work with for DMC. Hyper Bloom just makes it easier. And you're not going to be Pure Bloom because are you going to wait 6 seconds for the Dendro core? Are you going to risk your enemies hitting the cores and wasting your core generation? Not to mention the fact that you need to go generate yourself up to... Sorry, the numerical limit is 5. It's on the 6th that the first core will explode. So you need to keep generating... You need to generate 5 cores before you start dealing any damage. So most folks aren't going to play Pure Bloom right now. So isn't it great that she improves the Pure Bloom by removing the most boring and restrictive part about it, which is the 6-second wait time for the Rupture? And the whole reason why Rupture has a 6-second wait time is so that you are able to do the second stat reaction, which is Hyper Bloom or Virgin. Okay? So basically, Nilou removes that restriction. She makes it such that Pure Bloom will work without any wait time. And in return, you can't play Hyper Bloom or Virgin. So why is it an issue if you restrict it to Dendro and Hydro? And if you saw my Bloom related comp videos, you know that to begin with, for optimized Bloom cores, I recommended either double Hydro, double Dendro, or slot in an Animal. If you are using a Hydro main, for example. So all in all, I'll say that although we can't use Animal, her A1 passive restricting to Hydro and Dendro only is really not an issue to me. Because double Hydro, double Dendro still works. I already covered this in my optimized Bloom comp video or my Bloom related comp video. Yeah, true, no Animal painful, right? But her C2 covers that. It gives you the Hydro resistance strat and even Dendro resistance strat that 4-piece VV can't do. So it's even better than that. But yeah, you are spending money to get C2. It should be better. Okay? So as for Constellations, please refer to the Constellation summary on why I think it's a messy design. I don't want to repeat that whole long chunk that I've already done. I will tell you guys that this is a calculated move on Yoimiya's part and it kind of benefits F2P2. Because, again, like I said, Constellations improving damage means that as a F2P, when you're setting up a bountiful core build, you don't need Constellations for it to work. Alright? Now, I'll say this though. If you insist on not using her in Bloom, but using her as either a Hydro DPS or off-field enabler, it's perfectly fine to do so and it's feasible, right? You can play the character however you like. But don't expect that her damage will be great. When you are literally taking away her most defining ability to reduce rupture from 6 to 0.5 seconds while also buffing its damage. Because remember what her A4 passive does? Increases the damage as well. So neither is it a fair judge of her performance when you're ignoring what she's designed for. I really do not understand the people who ignore her passive, ignore her bountiful core, and then complain that she can't perform. I mean, do you seriously expect Hoyoverse to balance her without taking bountiful core damage into consideration? When the pain to design bountiful core as a main feature, which I really like because it looks really fun with all the quick explosions, by the way. Okay? I mean, there's bountiful core in there. Okay? She will be balanced with bountiful core in mind. Cannot expect that without doing bountiful core, you will do a fantastic job. That doesn't make sense at all. Now, to me, because if she does a fantastic or a very high damage without the bountiful core, if you're throwing her bountiful core, she'll be way too OP. Right? So to me, not using bountiful core on her is the same as trying to use only normal attacks on Hu Tao or only charge attacks on Yoimiya. And I can list a lot more. Like maybe only using normal attacks on Itto instead of charge attacks. And yet, I see people don't post about Nilou for this. I know it may not be an apple to apple comparison, okay? But design principle wise, it is because you are it's complaining about a character when you're not using the character's main feature and design. Are you gonna complain about Hu Tao when Hu Tao doing low damage when you're only using her normal attacks? Are you gonna do the same for charge attacks on Yoimiya? Are you gonna do the same for normal attacks on Itto? Right? You guys see where I'm coming from, right? Okay. Anyway, let's talk about the recent Q nerf and A4 passive buff. It's honestly just further evidence that what I've mentioned so far, which is that Hoyoverse meant her to be a bountiful core build to begin with, even for C0 and F to OP, and they're merely making changes to align with their design principle to begin with, i.e., a nerf is not always because an ability is OP. It may be required to align with key design so that you don't end up not going for bountiful core and you just do a separate hydro DPS. Then what's the point of pulling for her? And okay, and if you say that you pull for her because you sim her, then you should build her correctly. Otherwise, you're not a real sim. And I'm going to challenge the sims who challenge this. Okay, if you really sim for her, optimize based on her design. Not complain about her not having a good design just because you don't like that design. And by the mind you, she has not been released yet. Okay, all these are leaks. Once you see the actual testing, you see the bountiful core, you see the math, you know what I'm talking about. I already done the math to compare bountiful core versus hyper bloom. It's pretty good. Oh, that's what I would say. Okay, without giving away too much, it's pretty good. And now I do get that seeing a nerf is painful, but you have to remember that bountiful core is a main and core design, which got buffed, and it's not a wheel only buff by the way. Although technically speaking, wheel got buffed for the 300 to 400% max cap, but at least the 7 to 9 helps have to play players too, right? Now, of course, all of these are just me sharing with you my analysis and my opinion. We'll look at the figures in future videos to assess further on her performance. Otherwise, what's the point of me doing all this math series, right? It's always about using the math to actually find out how to optimize the character and what's best, instead of just like a gut feel or reading or based on some cursory level understanding. Alright? Okay, so this has been two very long sections, the Constellations Conclusion and case summary, but I think it's required because of all the, I'll say, misunderstanding going on for her. Okay, important notes and assumptions as usual. For the Sumeru meta, I'm dropping solo damage calculations. Nilou's ICD is as such, standard ICD on each attack in E. Tranquility Aura is 2 seconds ICD, 1 U, so it's very similar to Kokomi. Now for Q, I didn't find any info on E yet, so in terms of ICD, so if you do, feel free to let me know in comments. For my math, I'll just assume standard ICD, although it doesn't really make a difference because it's 2 hits. Okay. Energy generation, if you remember I mentioned earlier, it's total of 4.5 particles because you get 1 particle from the initial E hit with a 50% second chance. Wait, sorry, this should not be there. This is from the Cyno. So subsequent 3 normal attacks or E gives you 1 particle each, so total is 4.5. I know it doesn't sound too bad, but it's not great if you consider a CD, because it's 18-second E CD. So 4.5 particles is not that great. That's okay, it's okay. Nilou's rotation in general. So main TPS, it will be all your other characters setting up the sustain elemental of you, the buff setup, etc. Then you do E, N times 4, Q, N to N. Why is it times 4? This is for the sake of the C2 and C4. All of it. But don't worry, when I go into the com, I will adjust accordingly. But I can tell you guys right now, I don't think there's a need to go NAA3. There may be a scenario, but I'll cover that more when we go into the com, which will likely be Math Guide 3. Yeah, it's going to be the Math Guide 3. Okay, so off-field enabler wise, it will be E, triple E, followed by Q. And then you switch to your main DPS. Alright, so that's the rotation, general, energy generation, and ICD. So some pretty quick stuff after I've covered the kit. So let's talk about the TLDR. So Nilou is very similar to Cyno in terms of how stat hungry she is, with her demand being on HP percentage, crit stats on ER, EM, and flat HP. Her kit gives her a very nice design where she can either be a main DPS or an off-field enabler. just from her E alone, and affiliate enable actually. With the stats on both not being completely mutually exclusive, so you building these stats will help you on both, at least some of them. Now in return though, her core design is centered around bountiful cores, which restrict her to Dendro and Hydro, but I don't see an issue for this if it performs well. In the first place, Dendro is a new element. There should be such a focus on Dendro comps. I personally am looking forward to bountiful cores. They look really fun with the quick AoE explosions. It's even more boom boom than Klee, honestly. But if you want to know more details, I highly recommend that you look at the kit summary and Constellations Conclusion as well, because I addressed her Doom posting and wanting to ignore her passive too. Okay. Now for details on her energy generation, ICD, etc., do check out the specific sections. Okay, it's all here. ICD, energy, rotation, then you have the kit summary and the Constellations Conclusion, and of course going through her kit earlier. So that's that for the Math Guide 1. Still went on a little longer than I wanted, even after cutting away what is now going to be Math Guide 2. But I guess it's because there's so much controversy and misunderstanding for her kit. Yeah. So the kit analysis is completed. Next, we will do Bountiful Cores versus Hyper Bloom's Aspersion, so you can see how competitive it is. And then also the HP versus EM scaling, so you know whether is HP or EM a priority. I will show you guys this. I even have charts for this. And third math guide will be Bloomcom, and I may do a few videos for Bloomcom, maybe different characters, different edition, depends. And of course, you have artifact comparison, weapon comparison, specific weapon math, constitution refinement comparison, etc. Alright. So as usual, let me know if there's any specific math you want. I will try to see if I can do it, but it's gonna be tough because right now every patch is 5 weeks instead of 6 weeks, and they're still releasing 3 new characters each patch. I have not even looked at Candice's kit in detail yet. I mean, I look at it at a high level, but I didn't look at it in detail. Okay, so anyway, if you like the content, remember my video and please subscribe for more. Thanks everyone for watching. I know I gave this is a bit more opinionated piece, and probably more people will be unhappy with. Some people will be unhappy with what I am saying here, but I do hope that you guys will take a more objective view on this, because I am being very objective here. I'm not a sim for her design. Yeah, sure, she looks graceful, elegant, etc. But and I guess pretty, but it's not to the extent where I sim for her. Honestly speaking, me playing Genshin, I have not really seemed like super hard for any character so far. Yeah, it's just not there. It's just not the way I am. Okay, so I'm pretty objective when I'm doing all this analysis and doing this opinion. Alright, thanks everyone for watching. Bye.